Good morning, afternoon, everyone. Fear and anxiety, two words that can feel so heavy, yet so universal. We've all felt their grip at some point, haven't we? That racing heart, the restless nights, the self-doubt whispering, what if you fail? But here's the truth. Fear and anxiety aren't barriers meant to stop us. They are signals calling us to courage. As Brené Brown says, vulnerability is the birthplace of courage. Facing fear doesn't mean being fearless. It means daring greatly despite it. Today, I want to take you on a journey not away from fear and anxiety, but through it. Because on the other side of that discomfort lies growth, resilience, and a life that feels true to who you are. Together, let's explore how to embrace vulnerability, challenge self-doubt, and transform the way we face fear into a source of strength. Fear is a universal emotion that every person experiences at some point in their life. It's hardwired into our biology, a survival mechanism that has kept humans alive for millennia. But while fear once served as a warning against physical threats like predators or natural dangers, in today's world, it often manifests in more subtle, internal ways through self-doubt, uncertainty, or the unknown. Acknowledging your fear is the first and most critical step toward overcoming it. However, acknowledging fear doesn't mean surrendering to it. Rather, it's about giving it space, understanding it, and ultimately taking control of how it influences your actions. When fear arises, it often brings with it a rush of adrenaline, a sense of heightened awareness, and a cascade of thoughts that can feel overwhelming. These sensations might urge you to avoid the source of your fear, ignore it, or push it aside. Yet ignoring fear does not make it disappear. In fact, avoidance often gives fear more power. The more you run from it, the more it seems to grow, lurking in the background and influencing your decisions in ways you might not even realize. Acknowledging fear requires the courage to stop, turn around, and face it head on. This process might seem daunting, but it is also incredibly liberating. Acknowledging your fear starts with recognizing its presence without judgment. Many of us are conditioned to believe that feeling fear is a sign of weakness or inadequacy, but fear is not an enemy, it's a signal. It tells you that something matters, that you're stepping into unfamiliar territory, or that you're confronting a challenge. Brené Brown reminds us that vulnerability, which often accompanies fear, is not a weakness, it's the birthplace of courage. When you acknowledge your fear, you're also acknowledging your humanity. You're saying, I see you, I hear you, and I'm willing to explore why you're here. One way to begin acknowledging fear is by pausing and observing it without trying to immediately fix or suppress it. This practice is often referred to as mindfulness. When you feel fear creeping in, take a moment to breathe deeply and focus on what's happening inside you. Ask yourself, what exactly am I afraid of? Where do I feel this fear in my body? What thoughts are running through my mind? By identifying and naming your fear, you bring it out of the shadows and into the light. This act of naming can be surprisingly powerful, as it helps to demystify the emotion and separate it from your sense of self. Another aspect of acknowledging fear is understanding its roots. Often, fear stems from past experiences, limiting beliefs, or societal pressures. For example, you might fear failure because you've been taught that success defines your worth. Or you might fear rejection because of past experiences where vulnerability was met with criticism. Taking the time to reflect on where your fear originates can provide valuable insights into how it shaped your behavior and perceptions. When you understand the source of your fear, you can begin to challenge its validity and reframe the narratives you've been telling yourself. It's also important to remember that fear thrives in silence. Many people keep their fears hidden, afraid to admit them even to themselves, let alone others. But speaking your fear out loud to a trusted friend, mentor, or even in a journal can be incredibly cathartic. Sharing your fears creates connection and reminds you that you're not alone in your struggles. It also helps to diminish fear's power by bringing it into the open, where it can be examined with clarity and perspective. Acknowledging fear doesn't mean you have to like it or even fully understand it right away. It's about creating space for it and allowing yourself to be present with the discomfort it brings. This act of acknowledgement is not about dwelling on fear, but about accepting its existence as part of your journey. Fear is a natural response to stepping outside of your comfort zone, and acknowledging it is a way of honoring the growth and change you're pursuing. When you take the time to acknowledge your fear, you might find that it's not as insurmountable as it initially seemed. Sometimes fear is simply a signal that you care deeply about something or that you're on the verge of something meaningful. By leaning into this acknowledgement, you start to build a relationship with your fear that is rooted in understanding rather than avoidance. This shift can help you move forward with greater confidence and resilience, knowing that fear doesn't have to control you. It can guide you toward deeper courage and self-awareness. Anxiety is an emotion that can often feel overwhelming and consuming, leaving us trapped in a cycle of worry and unease. It has a way of clouding our thoughts, making it difficult to see situations clearly or to respond rationally. One of the most effective ways to begin managing anxiety is to name it. This practice of identifying and labeling your emotions can help you gain clarity and diminish the power anxiety holds over you. Naming anxiety isn't about solving the problem right away. It's about acknowledging its presence and understanding its role in your emotional landscape. When anxiety strikes, it often comes with a whirlwind of thoughts and feelings. You might feel a tightness in your chest, a racing heart, or an inability to focus. In these moments, it can feel like anxiety is this looming, uncontrollable force. However, when you pause and consciously name what you're experiencing, you take the first step in separating yourself from the emotion. Instead of saying, I am anxious, you can reframe it as, I am feeling anxiety. This subtle shift in language can make a big difference because it reminds you that anxiety is an experience, not your identity. Naming your anxiety requires tuning into your inner world. It starts with self-awareness and a willingness to observe what's happening without judgment. Take a moment to ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? What thoughts are running through my mind? What physical sensations am I noticing in my body? By engaging with these questions, you begin to create a mental map of your anxiety. For example, you might notice that your anxiety is tied to a specific fear, like failing at an important task, or to a situation where you feel out of control. Once you've identified that anxiety is present, the next step is to label it as specifically as possible. This process is sometimes referred to as emotional granularity, which is the ability to differentiate between nuanced emotional states. Instead of using broad terms like I feel bad or I'm stressed, try to pinpoint the exact nature of your anxiety. Are you feeling overwhelmed by a looming deadline? Are you nervous about an upcoming social interaction? Or are you uncertain about a major life decision? Giving your anxiety a name, whether it's performance anxiety, social anxiety, or uncertainty, can help you better understand and contextualize what you're going through. Labeling anxiety doesn't just help you make sense of your emotions, it also activates a different part of your brain. Research has shown that naming emotions engages the prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain responsible for decision-making, reasoning, and self-regulation. This can help calm the amygdala, the brain's emotional response center, which is often hyperactive during moments of anxiety. In essence, naming your anxiety shifts your brain from a reactive state to a more reflective one, allowing you to approach the situation with greater clarity and composure. It's important to note that naming your anxiety doesn't mean you have to analyze or fix it right away. Sometimes the simple act of naming is enough to create a sense of distance between you and the emotion. It's like shining a flashlight into a dark room. What once felt ominous and undefined becomes more tangible and less intimidating. By naming your anxiety, you acknowledge its presence without letting it take over. Another powerful aspect of naming anxiety is that it helps to normalize your experience. Many people struggle with anxiety but feel ashamed or embarrassed to admit it, even to themselves. By naming your anxiety, you're breaking the silence and giving yourself permission to feel what you're feeling. This act of self-validation can be incredibly empowering, reminding you that anxiety is a natural and common part of being human. Naming anxiety also opens the door to deeper self-reflection. Once you've labeled your anxiety, you can begin to explore what it's trying to tell you. Often, anxiety is a signal that something in your life needs attention. It might be pointing to unmet needs, unresolved fears, or situations that feel misaligned with your values. By naming and examining your anxiety, you can start to uncover its underlying causes and take steps toward addressing them. Finally, naming your anxiety creates space for compassion and self-care. When you identify and label your emotions, you're acknowledging your inner experience in a way that is kind and non-judgmental. This practice helps you build a healthier relationship with yourself, where you can approach your emotions with curiosity and understanding rather than resistance or shame. Vulnerability is often misunderstood in a world that values strength, independence, and certainty. For many, vulnerability is seen as a weakness, something to be hidden or avoided at all costs. However, as Brené Brown has emphasized, vulnerability is not a weakness, it's a strength and a powerful act of courage. Leaning into vulnerability means embracing the discomfort of uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure rather than shying away from it. It's about showing up authentically, even when there are no guarantees of success or acceptance. This process is transformative and can lead to deeper connections, greater self-awareness, and a richer, more fulfilling life. To lean into vulnerability, you first need to recognize what it looks like in your life. Vulnerability can take many forms that might be speaking up in a meeting, sharing your true feelings with a loved one, or taking a leap of faith toward a dream that matters to you. These moments often come with a mix of fear and hope, a sense of stepping into the unknown. They require you to let go of control and be open to the possibility of failure, rejection, or disappointment. But in doing so, they also open the door to growth, learning, and connection. A key part of leaning into vulnerability is acknowledging the fear and resistance that often accompany it. It's natural to want to protect yourself from pain and uncertainty, and this instinct can lead to behaviors like shutting down, avoiding risks, or putting up emotional walls. However, these protective strategies can also keep you stuck, preventing you from experiencing the full range of life's possibilities. When you choose to lean into vulnerability, you're making a conscious decision to face your fears and move through them rather than letting them dictate your actions. One of the most challenging aspects of vulnerability is the discomfort it brings. It's not easy to open yourself up to the possibility of failure or rejection, especially in a culture that often equates vulnerability with weakness. But discomfort is not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's a sign that you're growing. Leaning into vulnerability requires you to sit with this discomfort and trust that it's a necessary part of the process. It's about accepting that you can't control the outcome, but you can control how you show up. Leaning into vulnerability also involves letting go of perfectionism. Many people resist vulnerability because they're afraid of being seen as imperfect or inadequate. They strive to present a flawless image to the world, believing that this will protect them from criticism or judgment. But perfectionism is an illusion. It's impossible to achieve and often leads to feelings of inadequacy and burnout. When you embrace vulnerability, you're also embracing your imperfections and recognizing that they're a natural part of being human. This shift allows you to connect with others on a deeper level, as it's through our shared imperfections that we find true understanding and empathy. Another important aspect of vulnerability is its role in building connection and trust. When you allow yourself to be vulnerable with others, you're inviting them to do the same. This creates a space for authentic connection where people can feel seen, heard, and valued for who they truly are. Vulnerability is the foundation of meaningful relationships, whether it's with a partner, friend, colleague, or family member. It's through vulnerability that we build trust, foster empathy, and strengthen our bonds with one another. Leaning into vulnerability also means being willing to take risks, even when the outcome is uncertain. This could mean pursuing a passion project, asking for help, or sharing an idea that feels deeply personal. These actions require courage, as they involve putting yourself out there and risking failure or rejection. But they also hold the potential for immense rewards, new opportunities, personal growth, and a deeper sense of fulfillment. By taking these risks, you're showing yourself and others that you're willing to step outside your comfort zone and embrace the unknown. It's important to remember that vulnerability is a skill that can be cultivated over time. It's not something you have to master all at once, nor is it something that comes easily to everyone. Like any skill, it requires practice, patience, and self-compassion. Start small by allowing yourself to be vulnerable in situations where you feel relatively safe. As you build confidence, you can begin to lean into vulnerability in more challenging areas of your life. Leaning into vulnerability also involves reframing how you view failure and rejection. Instead of seeing them as evidence of your inadequacy, try to see them as opportunities for growth and learning. Every time you allow yourself to be vulnerable, regardless of the outcome, you're building resilience and strengthening your capacity for courage. You're proving to yourself that you can face uncertainty and discomfort and come out stronger on the other side. Fear often narrows our vision, convincing us that it is a barrier we cannot overcome. It tells us that failure is imminent, rejection is certain, and the unknown is dangerous. In moments of fear, our natural response might be to avoid, withdraw, or retreat to a place of perceived safety. However, by shifting your perspective, you can begin to see fear not as a roadblock, but as a signal, a teacher, or even an opportunity for growth. Reframing fear changes the way you approach challenges and opens up new possibilities for resilience, learning, and self-discovery. The first step in shifting your perspective is to understand that fear is not inherently negative. Fear is a biological response designed to keep us safe. It heightens our senses, focuses our attention, and prepares us to respond to potential threats. But in modern life, fear often arises in situations where there is no immediate physical danger, such as speaking in public, making a difficult decision, or taking a risk on a new venture. In these scenarios, fear is less about survival and more about navigating uncertainty. Recognizing this distinction can help you see fear as something manageable rather than something to be avoided. To reframe fear, it's helpful to ask yourself what it's trying to teach you. Fear often arises when we are stepping outside of our comfort zones or facing something that matters deeply to us. For instance, fear before an important presentation might indicate how much you care about the message you're delivering. Fear before pursuing a new opportunity might reflect your desire to succeed and make an impact. By viewing fear as a signpost, you can begin to see it as an ally rather than an adversary. It's pointing you toward areas of growth and potential. Another way to shift your perspective on fear is to focus on the opportunities it presents. Fear often thrives on worst-case scenarios, filling your mind with thoughts of what could go wrong. However, the same situations that evoke fear also hold the possibility of positive outcomes. A presentation could lead to recognition and influence. A new opportunity could lead to personal fulfillment and success. By consciously redirecting your attention to these possibilities, you can balance the narrative in your mind and give yourself the motivation to move forward. It's also important to recognize that fear often exaggerates reality. When you're afraid, your mind tends to amplify risks and downplay your ability to handle them. This can create a distorted view of the situation, making it seem more daunting than it actually is. To counteract this, take a step back and assess the situation objectively. Ask yourself, what is the worst that could happen? How likely is that outcome? What resources or skills do I have to navigate this challenge? By breaking down your fear into smaller, manageable pieces, you can reduce its intensity and gain a clearer perspective. Shifting your perspective on fear also involves embracing a mindset of curiosity. Instead of viewing fear as a barrier, try to see it as an invitation to explore. What lies on the other side of this fear? What might you learn about yourself in the process of facing it? When you approach fear with curiosity, you transform it from something that paralyzes you into something that propels you forward. This shift in mindset can make even the most intimidating challenges feel more approachable. Another powerful way to reframe fear is to view it through the lens of growth. Fear often arises in moments of change or transition, times when you are stepping into something new or unfamiliar. While these moments can feel uncomfortable, they are also opportunities for personal development. Every time you face a fear and move through it, you build confidence and resilience. You prove to yourself that you are capable of handling challenges and that fear does not have to hold you back. Over time, this process of confronting fear can help you expand your comfort zone and unlock your potential. Shifting your perspective on fear also means accepting that it is a natural and inevitable part of life. No one is immune to fear, and trying to eliminate it entirely is not realistic. Instead, the goal is to change your relationship with fear see it as a companion on your journey rather than an obstacle in your path. When you accept fear as a normal part of growth and change, you free yourself from the need to fight or resist it. This acceptance creates space for you to move forward with greater ease and confidence. One final aspect of reframing fear is to practice gratitude for the lessons it brings. While fear is uncomfortable, it also serves an important purpose. It highlights what matters to you, challenges you to grow, and reminds you of your strength and resilience. By expressing gratitude for these aspects of fear, you can transform it from something you dread into something you value. This shift in perspective not only helps you navigate fear more effectively, but also allows you to approach life's challenges with a greater sense of openness and curiosity.